you're sitting quietly and you're experiencing self-delight, you do not want to move. You don't want to think. And all you'd like to do, if you could do it, would be able to be for eternity, untroubled by the need to do or think or become. That's what the ground of being, or that part of yourself, the absolute dimension of yourself, feels like. Right? That's what its nature is. So when you experience that, when you feel that, that's what that is. You see my point? That's what that is. But it's important to understand, though, is that what's so unique and extraordinary about our particular species has to do with the fact that we have this creative impulse. So the lowest or the most primordial expression of it is a biological expression of the first cause of the Big Bang, which is the urge to procreate at the biological level. But a much higher expression of the first cause, or the urge to become, the creative principle, is the urge to create, to find new and better ways of doing things. Right? And boy, are we moving quickly at that. But that's also the first cause of the Big Bang, the creative impulse, isn't it? Yes. Does everybody understand that? This is if you really want to get why this whole evolutionary perspective is so important, is when you realize that the creative impulse, the expression of the urge, the spontaneous urge to create, where does it come from? When you begin to see that the sexual impulse, that the creative impulse are the same thing, right? You have a lower expression of it and a higher expression of it. So the inspired poet, artist, musician, engineer, scientist, politician, the most talented, creative individuals, the deeply inspired individuals who are being moved by the first cause. That's an expression of the first cause creative impulse. And then the most profound, the deepest and the most profound expression of the first cause of the creative impulse is the spiritual impulse. And the spiritual impulse is the urge to become conscious, the urge towards consciousness, which is what I imagine was what brought all of you here this weekend. So the whole point then is to begin to see, so there's the sexual impulse, then the creative impulse, which is what makes human beings so extraordinary, and then the spiritual impulse. The spiritual impulse is the urge towards consciousness, or the urge to become conscious, the strange, miraculous compulsion towards consciousness. I must become more conscious. I must. Right? A creative person, a creative musician, scientist, engineer, politician, really creative, talented people, they are fired up. They're inspired by a passion. I have to accomplish that which is new. So there's a new potential in science. There's a new potential in politics. There's a new potential in whatever field, doesn't really matter. But there's that striving, that irrational compulsion to strive to create something new. To create the most creative individuals are inspired by the creative impulse, the first cause. And then, once again, at the highest level, it's experienced as the irrational compulsion towards consciousness. I must become more conscious. It's not, oh, I would like to, and that's a wonderful idea, but it's experienced as I must, I have to, I have no choice. It has to happen. There's a moral dimension to it. Everybody get that? Yeah. So then now we're talking about being and becoming. The urge to become, the highest and the deepest and the most profound expression of the urge to become is the spiritual impulse. The outer reaches of the Big Bang, the farthest reaches of the Big Bang, is the urge towards consciousness, the consciously realized urge towards consciousness. You can be driven to become more conscious, but when you actually are developed enough to experience a compulsion towards consciousness and recognize it for what it is, that is a very big deal. And that's when you begin to be able to have the capacity to locate and identify what I call the authentic self. Okay? So what I'm calling the authentic self in this teaching is the evolutionary impulse, creative impulse, or the spiritual impulse. The spiritual impulse is the urge towards consciousness. The urge to become more conscious is the evolutionary impulse. That's the outer reaches of the Big Bang. Where has the Big Bang led us to? Right? The material universe eventually gave rise to life. which gave birth to consciousness, right? And now this capacity for self-reflective awareness, now the process through the very highly evolved human being can become aware of itself. And then as it develops, what begins to emerge is the impulse towards consciousness itself. The process itself is desperately trying or endeavoring to develop. Is that clear? So that's what when I call evolutionary enlightenment is about the awakening. Is awakening to this very particular dimension of the process, and awakening to it. And then when you really begin to get it, then ultimately the idea is to get the individual to commit themselves to being a vehicle for the process, because what we understand is the process itself is entirely dependent upon us.